say the companies Bally and Williams were god-tier legendary during the late 80s to the late 90s would possibly be the biggest understatement of all time. During the 90s especially, these companies created some of the best pinball machines ever made, something that still holds true to this day. So it's no mystery that whenever the topic of pinball comes up, especially when pinball from the 90s comes up, tables like Attack from Mars, The Addams Family, and of course everyone's favorite Medieval Madness are likely to be mentioned first. While this is definitely understandable and justified, it's still kind of sad seeing how there were many other pinball machines released by many other companies that were also excellent experiences and ones many of us fondly remember. One of those companies was better known for Speedy Blue Hedgehogs, failed console add-ons, and blast processing, rather than their excellent pinball machines released during the 90s. Of course, I'm referring to Sega. Yep, that same Sega that brought us Sonic, Goldeneye, and Virtua Fighter also was responsible for releasing some of the most memorable pinball tables of the 1990s. Sega's pinball division released around 20 tables from the mid to late 90s, many of which were based on blockbuster movies or hit TV shows at the time. And while Sega did produce many pinball machines during the 70s, they essentially went dormant for a decade and a half until 1995 when they made their comeback with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and Baywatch. While neither of these machines were probably stealing a ton of quarters from Attack from Mars or Jurassic Park machines right next to them, Sega would eventually up their game and release much better tables over the next few years. Sadly, Sega's foray into pinball during the decade of grunge rock and pogs was short-lived, with Sega packing up the plungers and flippers and selling their pinball division to Stern in 1999. Despite Sega's brief resurgence into the pinball world, they managed to release some excellent machines in those 4 short years, and I've gone back and replayed nearly every single one of them to find out which ones happen to be the very best. After doing just this, I've confidently compiled this list of top 10 Sega pinball machines released during Sega Pinball's glorious 1990s comeback. And without further delay, here they are. Number 10, The Lost World Jurassic Park. I was obsessed with dinosaurs during the 90s, with 1993's movie sensation Jurassic Park being no small contributor to this. So when I learned that it was getting a sequel in 1997, I nearly had a juvenile aneurysm from being so excited and hyped. However, if I had known that there was also a kick-ass pinball machine of The Lost World back then, it likely would have tipped me over the edge. But discovering this table years later as an adult, The Lost World ended up being, well, worth the wait. Kind of. Don't get me wrong, this is an excellent pinball machine with straightforward rules, a simple layout, and that frickin' backglass with a T-Rex chasing down Malcolm in a car is beyond epic. However, the rest of the table, mostly the playfield, looks like it was ripped out of a Lisa Frank coloring book. I mean, the baby T-Rex looks like it eats frickin' rainbows instead of the bleeding flesh of iguanodons. But questionable art direction aside, you'll be doing a variety of tasks around the table, all while Jeff Goldblum narrates the action taking place as the quirky Ian Malcolm. While the Data East machine for the first film is still undeniably better than this one, The Lost World is still worth chucking quarters into and a fun experience despite being designed for little girls. Kidding, this is a kick-ass machine, but our next table is even better. Number 9, Starship Troopers. I remember like it was yesterday, going over to the Tough Kid's house for a weekend slumber party when I was in 5th grade, and his mom letting us rent whatever we wanted to. Of course, my friend and I had to pick the most degenerate, violent movies we could think of, so naturally we rented RoboCop and Starship Troopers. Between the bugs, blood, boobs, and brains, I was mortified, disgusted, and entertained beyond belief after watching both films. These same adjectives pretty much sum up my feelings towards the 1997 Starship Troopers pinball machine as well. I mean, no one can accuse the Starship Troopers table of not being faithful to the movie one bit. The whole point of this table is to hit various colored bumpers around the table that represent the different types of bugs from the movies, and your goal is to planet hop and kill as many of them as possible by hitting these targets. This gameplay approach ends up being pretty fun and addictive overall, as you'll be doing this between multi-balls and various other events you can trigger while playing. And while the playfield's art direction isn't the greatest, one thing this table's art direction does have going for it is quite possibly the most metal drain in all of pinball. I mean, yeah, this table is fun and badass just like the movie. Oh, and remember, everyone plays this game, no one quits, and if you turn this video off prematurely, I'll kill you myself. Number 8, Independence Day. Probably more than any other movie I've referenced in my short YouTube career, 1996's Independence Day has probably been brought up the most. Part of this is I really enjoy Independence Day and have a buttload of nostalgia for it. On top of that, going back and watching it is just as hilarious as it is cool. I mean, the absurdity on how they defeat the aliens, certain characters' behavior, and some of the most absolutely cringeworthy lines in this film make it impossible not to love and also laugh at as well. So it should be no surprise that I'd find its pinball machine equally endearing. This table's fast-paced definitely go along with its aerial combat theme and objectives. Also, having a third flipper towards the top of the playfield helps create some pretty fun scenarios, along with the many loops you can blast the ball through. And while the table's audio is just sound clips from the movies mostly, they are used perfectly to coincide with whatever's happening as you play. I definitely cracked up more than once when a specific line from the movie was used in reference to me losing my ball in the out lane, or even getting a game over. But overall, this table is great fun, and if you want a fast-paced, frantic pinball machine, then Independence Day should absolutely abduct some of your quarters. Number 7, Space Jam. Okay. When I found out years ago Sega made a Space Jam pinball machine, I nearly pissed myself laughing. But honestly, it makes perfect sense. Space Jam was a frickin' event when it came out in 1996. I mean, I wasn't even into basketball during the time, and beyond knowing who Michael Jordan was and also liking the Looney Tunes, you'd think I'd have given this movie a hard pass. No. My friends and I were more excited than Karens in a Starbucks drive-thru for this movie. Maybe it was the advertising and marketing, I don't know, but it was almost scary how hyped everyone I knew at the time was for Space Jam. And of course from that, video games, toys, and a pinball machine were produced to help sell this movie even more. And luckily, the pinball machine we got was pretty solid overall. Beautifully capturing the look and feel of the movie, Space Jam has you accomplishing a variety of tasks by sending your balls through loops, hitting targets, and even shooting hoops in order to rack up your score and trigger the game's multi-ball modes. Hell, even the skill shot has you trying to make a basket. But you'll have the Looney Tunes cast commenting on the action going on, and also having you use the display to raise your score further. Space Jam is a surprisingly good table that everyone who likes pinball should definitely check out, even if you do lack the childhood connection to it like myself. Number 6, Twister. I feel like Twister and pinball are somehow a perfect match. The movie followed a bunch of insane storm chasers led by Helen Hunt and Private Hudson as they chased down deadly tornadoes, drove through people's houses, and somehow go inside a tornado and come out of it unscathed right after it separates Oklahoma from the rest of North America. I mean, yeah. But anyhow, the absurdity of this movie is definitely part of its charm, and rewatching it today feels like watching some rad 90s music video as much as a feature-length action movie. But yeah, the whole chaotic, fast-paced theme translated well into Twister's 1996 pinball machine produced by Sega. Just like the movie, Twister has you chasing tornadoes as you hit various bumpers that represent directions the tornado is heading. You'll also be increasing the wind speed by chucking the ball through the spinners in the outer loop. However, more than that, you'll want to lock those balls inside Dorothy, which for those of you who don't remember was the giant drum filled with those sensors they were trying to get inside the tornado. This time though, you'll be filling Dorothy with pinballs, which will result in a very cool multi-ball mode, which has the balls being flung everywhere by a spinner and magnet towards the center of the playfield. This is definitely an extremely fun table, which you'll probably enjoy even more if you consider yourself a fan of the movie. But even if you're not, it's hard not to enjoy this challenging yet fun table that proves Sega knew what they were doing when creating a movie-licensed pinball machine, just like the next table on our list. Number 5, Goldeneye. It's pretty hard to argue against Goldeneye being the best Pierce Brosnan Bond film by far. Sure, Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Is Not Enough were pretty cool. We won't even mention that other one though. But one thing that Goldeneye had over those two movies was a masterpiece of a video game. As much as I love Goldeneye the film, Goldeneye the game on the Nintendo 64 became my obsession for a good year or two after it came out. I mean, this game revolutionized console local multiplayer, and even the single player game was better than the movie it was based off of. In fact, I think Goldeneye's video game is probably a huge contributor to that movie's legacy and status as one of the best, most iconic Bond films ever released. But anyhow, the film itself was kick-ass enough to get a pinball machine released for it too. I mean, Space Jam did after all, and look how incredible and iconic that movie is. Okay, kidding aside, Goldeneye the movie and the pinball machine are definitely better than their Space Jam counterparts. Goldeneye's art is awesome, yes, even though they raised the thick dial up to 10 on Natalia, and also prominently placed Minnie Driver on both the back glass and playfield, despite her being in the movie for maybe a minute. it. But Goldeneye will have you taking missions from Q and accomplishing them by launching the ball in various places around the table. In true James Bond fashion, you can even activate one of the game's multi-ball modes by launching the ball through the Goldeneye satellite dish after a ramp goes up right in front of it. I mean, how awesome is that? But as far as I'm concerned, Goldeneye the Pinball Machine does the film justice in the same way the N64 game did. In other words, it's amazing and you need to play it if you haven't. Number 4, Star Wars Trilogy. One thing I feel like I haven't expressed enough on my channel yet is that I am a massive Star Wars fan, at least the pre-Disney stuff anyways. My dad introduced me to the original trilogy of Star Wars films back in the early 90s, and I was instantly hooked after my first time watching each of them. I used to watch Return of the Jedi, finish it, rewind it, and immediately watch it again when I was a kid. That's just how much I loved that movie. So in 1997, when Lucasfilm completely remastered the original trilogy and re-released them back in theaters for the first time in over a decade, I nearly shit my pants with excitement. And yeah, I know, the added CG and that frickin' terrible music performance inside Jabba's palace have aged like a tuna melt left under the back seat in July. But for me, being able to see these movies for the first time in theaters was an experience I'll never forget. And of course, to commemorate this occasion, Sega developed and released Star Wars Trilogy for the arcades. No, not that one, this one. The Star Wars Trilogy pinball machine has you trying to accomplish a variety of goals that take the form of scenes from the original trilogy movies, like finding C-3PO's body parts after being blown to pieces in Cloud City, or saving Han, Leia, Chewie, and Luke from the trash compactor. In addition to all this, you'll be trying to thaw Han from carbonite, fly the Millennium Falcon, and perhaps the coolest thing of all, take out the Death Star with Luke's X-Wing to activate a multi-ball mode. There's just so much you can do here, and overall, the movies were well represented in this excellent table. Sure, many people will still love the Data East table more, or that newer Stern table. Sorry, I'm sorry. But if you can find the Star Wars Trilogy table, it's a must play, especially if you're a Star Wars fan. Number 3, Batman Forever. Out of all the tables I've talked about so far, there hasn't been one I actually saw as a kid. Sure, I saw the movies they were based off of, but for one reason or another, I just never came across any of those tables at my local arcade, Dave & Buster's, or the bars my dad took me to growing up. But finally, after 7 freaking tables, I've arrived at one that I actually experienced and played as a kid. And lucky for me, it happened not only to be one of the best pinball machines Sega ever created, but also one of the coolest looking pinball machines ever made. Yes, that's right, Batman Forever, released both in the theaters and arcades in 1995, is one of the coolest looking pinball machines ever made, in my humble opinion, of course. I freaking adore the custom art for this table, the excellent presentation of what's being shown on the display, and just literally everything about this table's presentation. And you're probably thinking, with me praising this table this hard, you'd think I accidentally meant to place it at number 1, right? The presentation of this table is top notch, no doubts whatsoever there. But while pretty good, the gameplay just doesn't hit that same level of quality. Still, this is a very fun table that will have you beating up Two-Face, solving the Riddler's riddles, driving up the side of buildings, and launching balls out of the bat plane at various targets. It's also among the most challenging tables Sega ever made, which means you better hope this thing is set to free play when you come across one. But if you are lucky enough to find this machine, be sure to blow off every other table and head directly towards this one. I mean, it's so good. Number 2, Apollo 13. So far, I've been able to share not only why each of these tables made the list, but also my personal experience with the IPs they're based on, or in the previous example, the pinball machine itself. Nope, not this time. Nope, I have never seen Apollo 13 despite remembering commercials for it as a kid, and also hearing it's a very good movie. And likewise, I've never played or even heard of this table until I started prepping for this video. To say my enthusiasm was pretty low going into this machine would be fairly accurate. However, when doing these lists, I try and evaluate each of these tables as objectively as possible. In other words, I try and place as much of my own personal feelings towards the property a table is based off of aside, and instead focus on the merits of the machine itself. But after playing Apollo 13 a lot, it has become one of the biggest and best surprises I've ever had with a pinball machine. Yes, Apollo 13 is an excellent table that has you attempting to bring the ill-fated spacecraft back to Earth by sending it through the Earth and Moon's orbit, launching the ball all around to complete missions like preserving fuel and maintaining life support, and also launching balls at the rocket it towards the top of the playfield for the most insane multi-ball in any pinball machine ever. One thing I learned after playing so many of these tables for as long as I did is Sega really likes their multi-ball modes. This not just includes the amount of multi-ball modes available, but the actual number of balls each machine throws your way when one of them is activated. Some of these machines had me thinking, oh wow, 6 balls? What were they thinking at Sega? This is madness. That is until I played Apollo 13, which has a 13 ball multi-ball mode. I mean, this is just ridiculous and out of control. There is no strategy I can think of for managing this level of shit showery. Just furiously hit the flipper button, have a good time, folks. I've played many pinball machines and I've never seen this many balls on one table. If there is a multi-ball mode that is more insane than this, please let me know in the comments, please. But ridiculous multi-ball modes aside, this is an incredibly fun table that I'd place close to some of the better Bally-Williams machines released during the 90s era of pinball in terms of quality. And let's be honest, that's probably one of the best compliments you can give to any pinball machine. That is why you should definitely check it out, or hell, even buy an Apollo 13 machine if you can find one. It would be beyond worth it. Number 1, South Park. Okay, so this is going to be an incredibly controversial placement, especially at the number 1 spot, but hold your downvote for a moment and let me explain myself. Yes, there are some very, very divisive opinions about this table, with some saying this is an excellent machine, while others claiming it's one of the worst tables ever made. I definitely entertained both opinions while playing South Park, and well, I just can't really see where the latter opinion comes from. Yeah, this table is not super complex in terms of rules or objectives, nor is it the best designed table ever, even for a Sega pinball machine, but it's still the best machine I played out of nearly every Sega table ever made. Well, the tables that made this list, and even a few that didn't, are definitely fun, engaging machines. How often do you still see any of them? Seriously though, when was the last time you saw Twister, or what about the 3 arcades in your area that all have Godzilla or Baywatch? Oh wait, none of them have those tables? Oh. Or mention the Apollo 13 or Space Jam pinball machines and just hear the crickets, since no one has either played or seen them ever. However, by far the most remembered, loved, and still commonly played Sega pinball machine of all time is definitely South Park. To be fair, part of this has to do with South Park having the highest production numbers of any Sega pinball machine, but there's definitely more to the story than just that. South Park's gameplay is simple, straightforward, and fun, which is precisely why many people, pinball enthusiasts and non-enthusiasts alike, still heavily enjoy playing it. In South Park, you'll have to send the ball to various areas associated with several of the show's main characters, which then have you launching the ball back at them again in order to light up their faces on the playfield. Doing this may sound easy, but it definitely requires a decent amount of skill if you're trying to light up every character. While the gameplay of South Park is pretty fun, what makes it even more fun is the other stuff that happens while you're playing. This table 100% nailed its IP, not just with the look of the table, but with all the references, quotes, sounds, and music ripped directly from the first couple of seasons of the show. Not only that, but the characters from the show will comment on what's going on as you're playing, which is just awesome. And in addition to all this, you'll also be doing things like dropping your ball into a toilet and also murdering Kenny by flipping the ball at him. I mean, there is literally no way this table could have nailed South Park more than this. Combine that with fun yet simple gameplay, and it's no wonder this game is still a hit in arcades. South Park's enduring presence, popularity, and appeal makes it a no-brainer as being the best Sega pinball machine ever made. But, love it or hate it, there you have it folks, the top 10 Sega pinball machines. Hopefully you'll end up experiencing many of these tables at some point, since all of them are a blast to play. Sega absolutely deserves to be recognized as a valuable contributor to the pinball zeitgeist of the 90s, and all these tables are proof of that. But thank you all for watching, and also please throw a like and a sub my way if you enjoyed this video, and also haven't gone nuclear over South Park being number 1. But regardless, I'll catch you all next time, and have a good one.